Before we start the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. And now, let's go. Story 1. The glacier lake was quiet, its dark waters still, the pine-shaded shores deserted despite the high season. The date was August 8th. I remember because it marked an anniversary. I'd been dreading the 364 days leading up to it. It was the reason I was in the remote wilderness, up a 5,000-foot mountain, with a camping permit for a single night shoved somewhere in my hastily packed rucksack. I figured heavy legs and a sore back were a fair trade to reach a place cell service couldn't follow. I knew dozens of messages from family and near strangers were rolling in like storm clouds. But I didn't want their phone calls. Their texts. I didn't need more condolences. More inescapable proof that he was gone. What I needed that day was fresh air and to swim in water so cold it'd make me gasp, force my heart to start pumping, and feel alive again. I shrugged off my rucksack and swept my eyes one more time over the wide, placid lake that should have been teeming with outdoor enthusiasts, hiking influencers, and other reality escapists like me. In the heat of summer, the lake flooded every social media feed, topped every list and search engine. There should have been dozens of visitors. Yet somehow on August 8th it was just me, and the lake was just mine. That should have been a sign. Right then, all my grief-weary eyes saw was a sign of luck. Finally, some true peace. The mournful cries of ravens bounced off the sheer granite cliffs that rose around me like cathedral walls. I gave a throaty craw in response. The first conversation I'd had all week. I padded across the wooden dock that jutted into the lake, stripped off my clothes, and jumped. My body broke the glass-like surface of the water, the shock of cold instantly taking my breath away. I resurfaced, pulling in harsh gulps of air, every inch of my skin stinging. It felt so good. I flipped over, becoming a weightless, floating thing. Limbs splayed out, suspended in a moment. Try to forget the time. The anniversary. August 8th. My body buoyed by the water, mind buoyed by the quiet. Realization hit me like a gut punch. August 8th. 2 infinity symbols standing upright. Daniel and me. Never ending. And now nothing. What a cruel day to have died. I tilted my head back, filling my ear canals with water, muffling the bird cries, the intrusive thoughts, the sadness that threatened to pull me down like an anchor. At first, it was all white noise and the steady thrum of my pulse. Then a guttural scream engulfed me, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. So close I could hear sharp little pops and hisses, as though a voice was straining through a wall of bubbles, fighting for air. In a heartbeat, I was vertical, frantically treading water. Above the surface, there were no screams. I searched the surface and shoreline, thinking someone else must have arrived at the lake. But there were still no other visitors. Just me, wrapped in a profound hush, the kind of silence that felt alive. I was very much of the mind that something below wasn't. I shivered from more than the cold. A deep urge overtook me, a need to hear the scream again. I plunged into the inky depths, the watery cry like a warped whale song. The sound was chilling, laced with terror and a primal anger. I stopped swimming, partially emptied my lungs, and hovered beneath the water, a part of me perfectly in tune with the song. Then a second scream exploded from the darkness, eerily in harmony with the first. A haunting duet of shrieks and bubbles. I felt them vibrate against my chest, giving me the sense that the lake itself was coughing up some kind of dark secret. Did I want to uncover it? It felt like a question. And to be honest, I hung there, deciding longer than I'd admit anywhere else but here. Swim, a voice in my head shouted. Daniel. Fast starred. The water around me suddenly began to tremble. A rhythmic pulsing against my cold skin that told me something powerful was moving through the lake's depths. Headed straight for me. Through the gloom, 2 identical shapes surged toward me from below, their mirrored forms eerily human, uncannily alike, their synchronized momentum predatory and hungry. Their haunted screams intensified, sucking at the water, drawing me into their black abyss. I screamed, my own cry adding to the chorus. I kicked wildly, arms slicing through the cool blue, but I'd lost track of which way was up. Icy fingers clutched at my ankles, both my arms, pulling me down, simultaneously trying to rip me in two. I thrashed like a trapped animal, sending desperate ripples through the dark water as I struggled against whatever it was dragging me deeper. Bubbles burst around me in frantic clouds as I tried to claw my way free. No! I screamed again in a final bubble-laced roar, fighting with everything I had left in me. All at once, the sun tore through the clouds, igniting the lake into a brilliant sapphire blaze. In that sudden clarity, I saw that I was completely alone in the water. No icy fingers wrapped around my limbs. No predators yanking me under. I broke through the surface and drew in a long, shaky breath of air into my lungs before I started swimming. I couldn't get out of that lake fast enough. Slowly, painfully, I started crawling up the pebbled shoreline. The shallow waters were still heavy, still trying to drag me down. The second my body was free of the lake, I felt a tangible release. I'd barely caught my breath when I saw the two cairns. Gray and black stones, pitted like bone, were stacked into two identical piles just shy of the tree line. Gravesites too fragile to last, too stubborn to disappear. I made myself stand. I forced myself to look. On wobbly legs and bleeding feet, I stumbled closer. My teeth chattered violently as I read the matching dates that had been scratched into each bottom stone. The date of death, 8/8. Hey, a man's voice shouted behind me. It was a park ranger. An irate one. You shouldn't be here. Don't you know what day this is? The anniversary, I whispered. He eyed the water warily, then me. What? Do you have a death wish or something? August 8th, stay far from the lake. Everyone knows. Well, I certainly knew now. Who were they? I asked, hugging myself tight, failing to get my body to stop trembling. I turned my back on the two cairns and faced the glacial-fed water, flat and smooth as a mirror, like the lake was watching back. The burly ranger raised a pair of binoculars to his tired, sunken eyes, his weather-beaten face folding with unease as he searched the shoreline. For new visitors? Or for the ones who never left? They were twin sisters, he finally answered. 6 years ago, a storm hit bad, caused a flash flood, a real nasty one. One got swept away, vanished. The other drowned looking for her. My knees buckled. It was an echo of my past year, Daniel vanishing, dying. Me, feeling like I was drowning, searching for him. On the anniversary, the lake is theirs, the ranger continued, lowering his binoculars and turning his watchful gaze back on me. Everyone knows. So you said, I remarked, defensive, confused. As soon as the sun rises on August 8th, the land goes quiet. And not the peaceful kind. The air gets heavy. The trees go still. There's a weight that settles in, not just on the mountain, but in your bones. All of it's just wrong. All of it tells you to stay away. Stay gone. Everyone knows. I didn't know. I whispered thinly, a heartbeat away from panic. But every year, there's always one who makes it up to the lake. Something in the sadness of this place draws them near. The weight of it lures them in. He flicked his calm eyes to my bare legs. And the grief pulls you under. I looked down, my mouth dropped, but no scream came out. There, standing out against the goosebumps on my skin, were fingerprints deep enough to bruise. I heard laughter then, shaky, hysterical, the kind of sound that came only when fear and relief collided. I realized it was coming for me. I didn't let the grief pull me under, was all I could think. The grief couldn't pull me under. Not many can say they survived August 8th. The ranger told me, squinting at the setting sun. I turned away from the lake, gathered my clothes, shouldered my heavy rucksack, and felt light as a feather as I sprinted down the mountain, never looking back. Story 2. You can't fathom ever reaching an end once you've taken that unassuming right turn. Those endlessly straight roads stretch off as they touch the horizon, both mundane and uncanny. The thought of closing your eyes and just allowing the vessel you reside in to wrap itself around the nearest trunk, however hysteric, would only guide you back to that sun-damaged scarlet sign. The absent tick of both hands on your wrist only sees to sterilize the already boundless trawl, with the sole reverberation being the thin metal container pulling you along the deserted concrete. After only a few seconds or 3 eternities, these lanes are as familiar to you as the back of your hand. Each speed bump latticing the slip road to that charmingly well-maintained building tantamount to a knuckle as you trace their peaks. Whatever semblance of strength still resides within won't keep your eyes from wailing to you for a minuscule moment of respite from the hypnotic meanders. Neither will the husk of a vehicle you still crawl along the uneven highway in. In the end, we're all cattle guided down a raceway to an imperceptible end. Lingering just out of view, a mental projection built by a mixture of our primal subconscious and a wicked facsimile of our own transgressions. Its thralls dance to the tune conjured by that deep-rooted fear of being beneath an all-too-familiar presence, in order to heighten a flight response your body broadcasts. Innocent as it was, that turn was the last mistake you'll make. A moment's hesitation, the only thing separating you from its camouflaged maw and normalized sanity. All I can do is wait. Those footsteps grow closer as I slump deeper into the now hollow corpse of what I once raced across this boundless highway in. The pitch black of the night, only illuminated by the last flickers of life, my phone emits as my epitaph is scratched onto these aged pages. Whatever its intentions were, this is where the Ouroboros terminates. Following this endless road, I've gotten to my last stop. Garage sales aren't my thing, but with my grandpa being a bit of a collector and me moving across the country for college, I gave in to his request at my attendance. Nothing of note took my eye at first as we rummaged through boxes of old toy cars, searching for some vintage series. I had as little clue about Matchbox cars as I did about my own study project, due in just over 3 months, as my restless eyes lazily traced the box in front of me. Early mornings are a killer when I've got a lecture, let alone trawling through someone else's trash. Scouring the adjacent tables of used junk, toys, and miscellaneous accessories, I could feel eyes on my back. It wasn't the feeling you get when you know someone is waiting for you to turn around to start conversation, rather the feeling of being assessed. Every item I looked at, the way I moved, my small mannerisms all cataloged, as if I was being evaluated for yet another exam I was unprepared for. Flicking around to locate my would-be invigilator, the only other people at the rows of plastic fold-out tables were a middle-aged, balding man and a mother, attempting to keep her kid from shoving whatever was in arm's reach into his mouth. None of which seemed to even acknowledge my existence, as they inquired about the pieces of the collection of knickknacks. Suddenly, almost as if it had appeared out of the ether, my wandering eyes fell upon a small leather-bound book. It was definitely used, small tears, a stain or two, and the frayed ends of the bind all showed the item's age. Something about its appearance drew me closer, as a voice in the back of my mind whispered for me to read it. That momentary hesitation was broken by my grandpa beckoning me over to a sun-damaged red plastic bucket as he fished out a small Navy car. With its trance-like grip on me severed, I trudged over, forgetting about that book entirely. The short drive back mostly consisted of a conversation about why this series was so elusive for collectors, interspersed with segments from the radio. Another vehicle found just off the highway with no occupancy gave my grandpa another reason to lecture me about road safety, and like any early 20s guy, it went in one ear and out the other. The rest of the day was uneventful as I packed the essentials whilst he fixed my watch. He nagged me to get the battery changed regularly, but as usual my mind was elsewhere. With it only being my second time driving this considerable of a distance, my detail plan had me charting each exit and entrance on and off the highway in preparation. That week off was a nice change of scenery from our campus, and I didn't get many opportunities to pop home. Montana back to Oregon, no matter how tedious, was one trip I planned to undertake whenever I missed my grandma's home cooking, which undoubtedly would have been a week. Traffic, brilliant. Only minutes on the highway, and I'm already delayed. Checking my hands-free, there was a slip road that apparently swung me out on the otherized of whatever was causing this level of congestion. planning my route earlier, I'd not even noticed that there was even a road there, but half an hour less time stationary was tantalizing enough. Taking the right turn, I passed an evidently derelict car, lying motionless, angled off the lane facing the surrounding thicket. The driver's side door was cranked open, only just hanging on by the connecting joint as it lay limply at an all-too unnatural angle. Sadly, that scene wasn't what occupied the forefront of my mind. Annoyingly, my music cut off as this lane's poor signal was karma for not checking on that vessel's inhabitants. Only half an hour in, and the restlessness of that early sunrise had me waning. Something about this trip home, left we with little sleep last night, coupled with the day's previous events, had my eyes feeling heavier than they did at a 9 a.m. class. A ray of hope burned through my half-closing eyelids as I passed a large red sign for a gas station, and only 2 miles away. I remember thanking God as I took the next right and turned off. Funny how I was so happy to see that sign. Maybe if I'd actually scanned the slightly sun-damaged rectangle, some primal part of my mind may have connected some of the, in hindsight, more questionable dots. Pulling in, I quickly searched the spaces adjacent to the pumps, and surprisingly, the lot was empty. Stretching out every joint in my body that didn't come across as abnormal, with the station being somewhat remote, the lack of any other vehicles merging back onto the highway or following in behind raised no red flags. The station was fairly small, with 4 pumps and a handful of bays lining one of the picketed wooden perimeter walls, which themselves were overreached by an encirclement of pine trees. Across from me was the station's main building, which I hoped would house a suitable section of fuel for the duration of the journey. Sitting in the now silent vehicle, my mind alerted me to the absence of a soft, repeated tick. Nothing new. My watch often runs out of batteries long before I notice, but I was pretty certain my grandpa hadn't just given me a dead watch back after offering to pop a new battery. Trapsing my hand through the backpack, which lay on the passenger side chair, in search of my wallet, my palm came in contact with something I failed to recall packing. Gripping the paper package and wrenching it from my overstuffed pack, it revealed a thin rectangular shape. With little ease and a glimmer of intrigue, I tore the item's binding, exposing a brown leather covering. I'm guessing he caught me staring that morning, but I was happy to have received another item he thought I'd find value in. Unlike previous pieces, this wouldn't be as disposable, though in that moment I couldn't think of what I'd actually use it for. Part of me wanted to unbuckle the thin leather strap and indulge in its contents. However, the more rational side attempted to hurry me towards the red and white building in my periphery. Toying with the instinct to open it, a human shape shuffled past me as it headed towards the door of the gas station. Refocusing on what I had stopped off for, I switched off the engine, trading the book for my wallet, and followed suit. Entering through those transparent doors, I was met by an all-too customary layout and sweet, but slightly stale aroma. With an item in mind, I made a beeline for the coolers, passing the lady who'd shuffled by me only moments ago. She was a fairly young-looking mother, in a floral blue and orange summer dress. The image of her reading the label of a large bag of chips whilst pushing that baby blue stroller is a strange picture to recall, but her appearance was eerily familiar. Apart from myself, and her, the only other person in the store was an attractive, maybe 5-foot-ish Gothic cashier. Avoiding staring too long at a specific region of her appearance, I had a new dilemma: which drink would fuel me for the duration of the day. Analyzing each bottle within the cooler, I narrowed it down to original Monster or orange Gatorade. Deliberating for what was longer than it had taken me to get here, somebody else entered the store as the ring door alerting me to his presence. Too engrossed in my choices, I didn't turn to see the balding man wandered over and planted himself uncomfortably close as he also scanned the shelf beside me. His smell alone clued me into the fact that if I'd turned to face him, we'd have got into a head-on collision. That putrid scent of rot mixed with the sweet smell of gasoline had already started to make me lightheaded as I slunk around the adjacent aisle. With human interaction not being my specialty, I grabbed a couple of packets of whatever name brand snacks were on that shelf and made my way over to the counter. Every step I took, his eyes tracked me, I never turned to look at him fully, but just within my periphery, I could make out he was standing in the same spot, staring my way. With all the hairs on my body standing to attention, I awkwardly paid for my things, giving that whispery, quiet thanks to the cashier as I quickened my pace. Reaching the relative safety of my car, my body naturally relaxed, slumping down onto the seat as I laid the thin plastic bag on my passenger side. Cracking the monster and scanning the car park for a couple of seconds, a thought popped into mind, something that I'd been too tired to realize earlier. If my car was the only one here, how did those three get here? They couldn't have walked. We were right by a highway with little more than trees and grassland for as far as my admittedly poor eyesight could see. That awkward encounter was instantaneously replaced with a small but noticeable well of confused fear. My mind obviously perceived something my senses couldn't, but not wanting to find out, I buckled up and set off to hopefully make a considerable dent in the journey. I've been back on that road for a good hour or maybe more, but subconsciously, I felt myself counting the passing cars. Initially, they'd whiz by me every couple of seconds in either direction, but the road seemed scarce. I don't even know if I'd seen another car since leaving the gas station. That monster had caught up to me, and though I was definitely awake, my bladder was kicking up a fuss. Excellent timing. Another gas station only 2 miles away. Pulling in, I once again got pick of the bays. Parking up as I had, adjacent to the pumps, my body restrained me as I reached out for the door handle. Practically the moment I'd switched off the car and attempted to clamber out, a shadow crossed my driver's side as a young mother, pushing a light blue stroller, made her way over to the door of the building. That was close, I thought, as the feeling of that near miss was rapidly replaced by the nagging reminder of why I'd pulled in. Attempting to hold my bladder as best I could, I entered in loosely behind. Locating the bathroom and passing the attractive cashier, I paid little attention to the formulaic layout of the gas station, eyeing up the cooler as I passed. Breaking the dam I'd been holding back for a considerable length of time, a feigned ding was quickly masked as I flushed, washed up, and left the cubicle. Making my way back to the main floor, almost got into another head-on collision with a guy standing only an inch from the door. Apologizing and swiftly making my way around him whilst keeping my head down, I shuffled towards the close's cooler and made the inverse decision on what to drink. Paying, awkwardly smiling, and thanking the cashier, that pit seemed to grow. Not being sure why, my natural instinct was to check my shoulder as I pushed open the gas station door. My head turned and eyes locked with his, still standing motionless as the bathroom door. The same balding man stared back. Had he followed me from the first place? Or did he just have a twin brother? Even from that distance, I could see deep into his enlarged pupils, and a mirrored feeling of being evaluated caused my freeze response to kick in. We could have stood there for 5 seconds or 5 years, but time stood still as he watched me attempt to rationalize his recurring presence. All of a sudden, his body twisted in a mechanically fluid motion, and he strode towards me, not seeming to exert any effort as he glided down the aisle. Panic set in, and without thinking, my body was dragging me back to my little white car. Half tripping, as dropped from the pavement, I were trained back on the door to the gas station building. Some small part of my mind tried desperately to justify his actions, but the more primal portion overpowered it, giving me only one order: run. Flying into my driver's seat and flawing it out of the parking lot, my eyes were still trained on the entrance as he burst forth and swept the vacant concrete. As our gaze met again, his eye were almost gleeful as his otherwise blank expression traced my acceleration back onto the minimal safety of the highway. I was done. Who knew how long the road was and how much further it stretched? I needed a back. You're always told to keep your eyes on the road, both for your own and others' safety. Though I'd only had my full license for a year, those words didn't set off any alarms as I hysterically swirled my head, gawking at every vaguely human-shaped tree on either side of the road. It wasn't like I could accidentally hit another vehicle, with my car being all that inhabited this desolate stretch of road. Interspersed between my wild swings and frantic double takes, I caught myself subtly examining the road ahead. Staring down that straight lane, there wasn't even a hint that anyone had traversed these roads. No oil spills, Two-tone roadworks, or tire marks, accentuated the otherwise gray concrete trail. For a couple of minutes the road was back to its flat, expressionless self. Then I hit a large bump. Checking my rear view, it almost seemed like the concrete bulged up and out, almost like a bollard rather than a speed bump. But then again, why did a highway have a speed bump? That singular instance quickly became 3, then 4, all rising higher, some now pillars as high as my car, taking all my strength and mental agility to keep from coming to a complete and abrupt stop. Hitting the brakes and almost giving myself whiplash. I couldn't have been more than 50 centimeters from a now spire-like cylinder which pierced the canopy above us. Whatever force was at play here definitely didn't want it to go back. With the countless roadblocks, it didn't seem possible to even move without slamming into an unconformity springing from the concrete below. Checking my rear view, though, offered some semblance of resolve to my current minefield, almost as if goading me to again drive deeper. The road I just so perilously traversed was as flat and bleak as it once had been, in stark contrast to what lay ahead of me. Making the only decision I could, the car turned, and we were back on this endlessly straight road, deeper into its unassuming facade. Passing that same gas station again, I couldn't tell if it was just the road spitting out another slowly degrading copy, or it was in fact the same one I'd been chased from. It didn't matter, as my only goal was ahead. I needed to find the destination. This trail was leading me to turning what felt like the only corner in a good hour by this point. Though my hysterics reduced any time, keeping to an all-time low, for a moment my mind paused as my eyes traced up a tall red sign. Gas station in 2 miles. Hoping and praying I'd just hallucinated the previous instances due to my growing tiredness. I begged for my eyes to show me anything other than that same building as its shape came into view between the tall pine trees that encircled it. An identical building emerged from betwixt the canopy of needles, only offset by its overtly run-down nature. Unlike the gas stations prior, this one had definitely been neglected, leaving a vividly sharp paranoia of crossing a threshold I wouldn't be able to return from. Slowing down to a crawl, the parking area was devoid of any other vehicles, and quite rightly, as the stain variegation around the pumps coupled with the speckled mold patches would have surely put off any normal person, if any still existed. Half of my mind questioned whether I was just picking up on minor details, and all the stations just happened to be similar, though that rational half was quickly bypassed by the sudden emergence of a person. Striding into view from a gap between the slanted wooden fence and the tire pressure pump was a woman. Alarm bells blared as her appearance was unmistakably identical to the lady I'd encountered way back at the previous station. Something about her walk seemed off. Maybe it was the slight limp and evident reliance on that stroller to ease her step, but she looked tired. Each step was labored, more so than the first time I'd laid eyes on her. Still trundling along, and with my gaze fixed on her, I mounted the curb with a slight scrape and a fair amount of cursing. Surprisingly, on this remote street, with my car undoubtedly overlaying any ambient sounds of surrounding nature, she didn't so much as flinch or look my way. Whatever commotion I made seemingly never reached her ears, or more accurately, didn't elicit any such deviation from her current plans. Stopping and assessing the damages, I'd scratched the alloys and scuffed my passenger side wheel. With enough occupying my mind, already this just sank to the bottom of a well of issues I had no interest in fixing there and then. Still crouching and wiping the already mounting sweat from my brow, I again felt eyes on me. Standing and scanning the again lifeless parking spaces, there was no one and nothing in my immediate view. Those same malicious beams only sought to reaffirm their owner's animosity. Expecting to find myself face to face with them the moment I'd stood up, I still couldn't put a form to that feeling as I attempted to focus on what was currently pressing. Re-entering my car and starting the ignition in hopes of getting off this lane ASAP, my pulse slowly relaxed, back to a baseline, leaving an empty pit in its wake. Keeping my head trained on that building's perimeter as I passed, nothing seemed out of the ordinary other than its condition. Leaving that scene behind, I permit myself a final hesitant check of my rearview mirror in order to finally, fully settle my nerve. seeing only the back of the poorly maintained building and the road's perimeter tree cover. I was mere milliseconds away from refocusing on the road ahead, when an all too familiar figure lurched from the thicket opposite the station. He simply smiled as the distance between crumbled away, leaving his visage burned into my mind. We were merely a breath apart, and if he'd have willed it so, I'd have found out why he was infusing me with fear tantamount to a trapped mouse, coming face to face with an increasingly hungry snake. Backslash. The day was beginning to fade as I could faintly see my car's headlights beaming down on the road ahead. With them springing to life, my own eyes had started to waver. Who knows how long I've been driving, but that incessant orange light has been warning me of an impending stall to my journey. Just my luck, a lone red sign peeking from between two thin stumps. 2 miles till I'd see him again. I didn't want to stop, let alone even drop my speed lower than 30, though without any juice, I'd be walking. I don't even recall how many miles I had in the tank before embarking on this trip, or what time I left, but I could feel that I'd been driving for a heck of a lot longer than my NAV suggested. Like a grain of sand atop a dune, those thoughts were blowing away as the building came into view. Decrepit is as good a word I could use to describe its exterior. Peeling paint and loose tiles, some of which had already crumbled to the now mossy and overgrown concrete drive, painted a picture of neglect. Most of the windows were smashed or at least cracked in places, with a litter of small shards pooling at the main entrance. Even a small section of the roof had seemingly collapsed as the building itself sagged to one side. I'd have just assumed it was abandoned, if not for a shape trudging in its innards. Reaching a stop in order to ascertain who or what was still accessing that husk, there she was, emerging from my right as she had the numerous times I'd visited. As the station had, she too was deteriorating. Limping from betwixt the now rotten and collapsed fence, she held on to that now bent and disjointed stroller as if it were part of her, and from my angle, she might as well have been. Dragging what seemed to be her bruised and mangled right leg, she stared forward through barely open eyes. Her one and only continuous goal, to reach an unknown ending. Silently watching my body, as it had when she passed my car, fix me in place as it wrestled with the idea of attempting to offer assistance and getting the last remnants of fuel still encased in the station's only undamaged pump. Hesitantly checking all corners of the parking lot, windows of the station, and the darkening gaps between each tall trunk from within my vaguely safe cocoon, I mustered all the remaining courage I had and leapt forth. To my shock and amazement, the pump still worked. Though the dial didn't flicker to life, the sound of a jet of liquid bursting into the tank settled at least one of my worries. Still keeping tabs on my surroundings, I filled up on whatever that pump had left and said a silent prayer that this would be enough to get me to the end of the road. For a moment, I was prepared to climb back into the car and flee, but with the absence of that man and my mind still attempting to convince me that this situation wasn't as dire as I was making it out to be, I stepped towards the door. I'm thankful I didn't take too long to collect my thoughts, as only a couple of steps from my car, a panel from the cover overhead came crashing down onto my passenger side door. Smashing the window and taking my wing mirror was far better than taking me out. With that depressing thought, I pressed on into the dying building. Its interior, though a carbon copy of the building's prior, was only slightly altered by the cascade of shells, roof panels, and part of the wall that now lay scattered across the broken tiles. Vines creeped across the wall to my left as tree branches blocked the holes, letting a portion of the afternoon's light in. The lady, still leaning against her stroller, threatening to meld with it, stood motionless beside a shelf. Worn packaging and the surrounding debris covered her feet, but I could make out the Lay's logo from package her gaze was fixed to. In a similar manner, each shelf, once adorned with a wide selection of snacks, drinks, and other miscellaneous items, now lay bare. Some small remnants collapsed to the cold tiles, the crumbling facade of this ever being used by an actual person only now dawning on me. Walking over to the counter, I expected to see that attractive cashier again. With everything that had been happening, I almost forgot about her and how much she reminded me of my ex. But she wasn't visible through the dirty plastic screen. Not wanting to touch the eons of mold clinging to its surface, I peered closer. The same rusty metal containers and haphazard selection of debris. Shelves and part of the wall covered the floor, though in amongst those was another shape. Lying face down, I could make out the shape of a person, and by her green apron and black hair, I could tell who it was. Although part of me wanted to jump the counter and leave her the ajar door open, I could tell I was far too late to offer any help. Her twisted body mashed with the chair she'd been sitting at each time I sauntered over to pay. Her limbs broken in and fused up to the legs of the chair as she conformed to the convulsing aging of my vicinity. Shooting down my spinal column and back of my stem, another feeling overwhelmed my pity for the crumpled shape. That same projection of malice hit me like a semi-truck. In my investigation of the building's interior, I failed to keep tabs on my surroundings. With an almighty crunch, I was sent hurtling into the perimeter wall of the building. A pain so unbearably hot welled up like a geyser from my right thigh and lower leg as I instinctually gripped to soften the throb. Rapidly blinking through tear-covered eyes stood the balding man. He too had aged as the building around us had, looking near 90 in contrast to his middle-aged appearance. His wrinkled skin and frail appendages a vast inverse from the force he'd applied on my now battered leg. His slender frame lunged forward again, all whilst that venomous glare persisted. In my foresight, I rolled to my left, only just dodging his leap, and attempted to clamber back to my feet. The pain in my leg was agonizing, but worse was the lack of feeling in my ankle and foot. In the way you get pins and needles, I could tell my foot was making contact with the ground, but I could in no way control it. Limping to my feet, I dragged my crippled body to the only safe place left, all the whilst that man followed suit. He never spoke, didn't even groan, just pursued like a starving animal that had finally caught up to its prey. Throwing myself in and hitting the gas with all the force I could muster through that twisted limb, the vehicle sputtered off the overgrown drive and back onto the road. Evidently, I'd caught some glass on my frantic exit, but at least one of my tires was punctured as my body felt each bump. I just have to hope our damaged frames could hold out. / I'm beat. I don't know if it's the blood loss or just the effect of traversing this road for half an eternity. I've done what I can to bandage my ankle, and though I'm not a doctor, it looks and feels like an open fracture, if not a break. My vehicle is in a bad way too. That panel and whatever I drove over clearly did a number on my passenger side. Coupled with that, I'm currently running on single digits. My eyes and leg are crying for a moment of rest, which I'm closing in on. We've stopped just before a bend in the road, and through my flickering headlights, I can see the vague outline of a long, thin sign. With me going the way of my car battery, I can see him just down the road. He's a good half a mile away and is slowly dragging himself towards me. And here I am, sitting in the front seat, listening to that poor facsimile drag its feet across each uneven bump in the road. The battery like my tank at their limit. With my ankle, what good would running do? I'd only end up back at that all-too-jovial sign, signaling another lap of these lanes. I don't know what he wants, but just like the other two mindless husks, some part of me knows he's noting but a puppet. That book got some use after all. If you find it laying in the discarded remnants of this vessel, vacantly leaning off an unassuming road, try not to make the same mistake I did. If not, maybe you'll see me, scanning the coolers, deliberating over 2 drinks. Just another thrall tethered to this everlasting road, searching desperately for an end unattainable. Story 3. I heard a faint beep and the click of a keycard registering at the lock. I figured they must have had a hell of a time. Their laughter reverberated down the hall long before they arrived at the room. The woman sauntered in, giggling, kicked off her heels, then strode across the low-pile carpet and opened the mini fridge. I heard the shrill squeak of styrofoam when she placed it inside, probably leftovers from dinner. It smelled like Mexican. Enchiladas, maybe, or chili relleno. That was Tom's favorite, the bastard. I watched their feet move closer until they were standing in front of one another. Tom's size 13s were still on. Fucking clown shoes. The woman rose to her tippy toes, and I could hear their lips smacking against one another's. Heat rose in my face to the point I thought my head might pop, like one of those cartoon thermometers. I reached for the kitchen knife I had brought from home and held it over my heart, hands trembling. This was it. This was my moment. I tried moving my legs and arms, stretching, preparing for the physical undertaking ahead. Tom was a big guy. If I didn't do this exactly as planned, precisely as I had practiced, things would go south for me, fast. My joints ached as I moved them back and forth. I had been hiding beneath this god-forsaken bed for hours. Clothes rained onto the floor where, in my head, I had planned to slide out and pounce on him, plunging my blade through his thick neck. The woman's feet levitated from the floor and then disappeared. She giggled more, the tramp, then the bed caved to the point of just grazing the tip of my nose when he threw her on top of it. Tom's feet disappeared, one by one, as he mounted the mattress. I noticed the heat had left my face. I was so angry a moment ago, but I noticed now I was feeling something different. My vision blurred and tears ran down both sides of my face as the bed creaked above me. I left the knife on my chest and wiped my tears away. I hated myself for crying. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was the bastard that was supposed to pay today. Pay for the countless nights of phony meetings, just too far out of town to come home for the night. This scenario had played out in my head countless times. I knew where to stick the knife, the precise angle, what I would say to the bitch as she ran, screaming out the door, mascara running and tits flopping down the hall, pleading for housekeeping to save her life. And I knew this would be the end of the line for me. He would be dead, and I would go to prison, finally free of his lies. The tears were unstoppable now. I thought about Ryan and Hannah and what this would do to them. I told myself they would be fine. My sister would take them in. She was strong. She didn't let men walk all over her, lie to her, treat her like a used sack. She had a good husband. They would care for the kids. Plus, they were nearly through high school. They had their own lives now. They didn't need me anymore, and they surely didn't need their lying father. I grabbed the knife from my chest and gripped it tight as I could. If I wanted to do this right, I couldn't let this knife get out of my hands. But the knife shook so much, I could hardly maintain my grip. I dropped it on the floor beside me, and the handle thudded against the carpet. I froze, wondering if they might have heard, but the bed kept on swaying and creaking. I felt around for the knife at my side, and once I got my hand on it, I couldn't pick it up. The sanity pan in my mind's balance scale plummeted, and I realized I didn't recognize the woman I had become. Was I really going to go through with this? Was I going to throw my life away for this piece of shit? I cupped my hands over my mouth to stifle the cries beckoning at my quivering lips. This wasn't me. I'm no murderer. I'm a mother. I was head of the PDA, for God's sake. My mind did a complete backflip, and I began brainstorming how I could most quickly get out of this shitty hotel room. Finally, all the weight of the past few weeks, all the preparation, all the espionage, and thinking I would grow old in prison, it all drifted away. The woman began panting heavily, then screamed passionately. Fuck, I should not be hearing this. Why did I do this to myself? Suddenly, she stopped mid-scream. Guttural smacks and clicks came from deep within her throat, and the smooth sway of the bed was replaced by feverish shaking and thumping on the mattress. I tried to process what could be happening to her. Was she having a heart attack? No, Tom wasn't that good, the bastard. Finally, the shaking stopped. The room fell quiet, and I could hear my blood pumping, so loud I feared they might hear it too. The bed shifted as someone slid across. Then the woman's body flopped to the floor. She laid next to me, staring wide-eyed. The silhouette of fat purple fingers painted her neck. Something I had never thought about before was that death could look fresh. Although she wasn't breathing, there was a faint light still living somewhere within her. I imagined if someone resuscitated her quick, she might make it. Two bare, size 13s pounded the floor on either side of her body, and I recoiled, my brain finally catching up with the events. Tom dropped his knees, and for a moment, I thought he might bend all the way down and crane his head beneath the bed to say hello. But he didn't. He knocked the woman's clutch from a nightstand onto the floor, sending its contents flying. Tom grabbed a tube of lipstick. He pinched the woman's chin between his fingers, puckering her lips, and delicately applied the bright red lipstick with perfect precision. He then tidied up her eyeshadow, wiping a wayward smudge from the side of her face with his pinky. Then Tom stood and grabbed her by the ankles. I watched as her body slid across the floor and into the bathroom. A captive audience to this one-man show that I feared may have been a rerun. I swear her dead eyes somehow never left mine, locked on, like she was still somewhere in there, begging for me to jump in with my kitchen knife and carry out my plan. And the bathroom door slammed shut. Maybe I should run, I thought. Now, straight out the door. But what if he returned right as I slid out from under the bed? I didn't want to end up like her. Then I thought about Ryan and Hannah. They don't know what he is. Shit, I don't know what he is. He could hurt them too. But he wouldn't. Would he? I let out a deep breath and resolved to stay put. I would wait until morning if I had to. Until he left to dispose of the body. Whatever he did, whatever else I saw here in this room tonight, I had to wait it out. I had to get home to my babies. Story 4. Like everyone else, I'd seen in the headlines, 17-year-old girl still missing. Jasmine showed up to school only once after news of her sister broke, but by second period she'd vanished. It reminded me of last year when her mother had taken that terrible fall down the stairs. She'd hidden then too, like she was trying to hide from the pain itself. I ditched class and found her crouched by the school courtyard fountain, tears streaking her face. Without thinking, I handed her a tissue and let her lean on my shoulder until she calmed down. Gently, I put an arm around her. I know this is hell for you and your dad. She jerked away. Don't you dare speak like you know him. What? Did I say something bad? No. She shrank into herself. It's just, you have no idea what my home life is like. Dad's different. No, I never faced loss that sharp. But I remember my grandpa after his second wife passed. He taught me coin tricks like weaving them through my fingers, but when I tried to cheer him up, he snapped and called it a stupid waste of money. I don't think anyone handles this sort of thing well. And after your mom too? He's only human. Sometimes, she whispered, I don't think he is. She let her words hang in the air. I didn't hear from her for 3 weeks after that. It was June, and our mid-year assessments were fast approaching. I was cramming for an AP mathematics test when my phone chimed. Where do we stand? She texted. In all our conversations, she'd never been so blunt, but I understood. When life's chaotic, you grasp for anything stable, figuring out which relationships matter most. I took a deep breath and replied, Asterisk, I want something serious, a real relationship. I get it if you need to put things on hold, though. Asterisk 3 dots wobbled on my screen for several minutes before she finally wrote back. Let's talk things out of mind. I'll be there tonight, I texted. I slipped on a collared shirt, slim jeans, and cleaned the car in case we drove anywhere. She liked going for long drives in the dark where we could talk our feelings through without looking eye to eye. My phone dinged right as I pulled up out front of her house, and I pictured her waiting for me by the window, but instead she texted, Asterisk running late on errands. Keys are under the pot plant. Let yourself in. Asterisk, I twisted the handle and stepped inside. The lights were all on, but the house felt empty, sterile, like a show home for real estate. A chemical smell like bleach or dishwasher liquid clung to the air. Family photos framed the hallway. Jasmine, her missing sister Serena, and their dad, Isaiah. Only one photo showed their mother. Isaiah had taken down all photos of her after the accident, and now there were just faint outlines where frames once hung. My phone buzzed again. Which room are you in? I thought that was strange. Maybe she was worried about me snooping. I just walked in, I texted back. Okay, wait in the living room. Suddenly a slow, wet thud thumped above me. Something heavy, like bowling balls rolling off a shelf. Her dad shouldn't have been home. He worked night shifts, but something about it drew me to investigate. I climbed the stairs. Hello. With each step, the thrashing grew more insistent. Then I identified the sound. Shoes. Shoes that were pushing against the floor like somebody was trying to stand up on a slippery surface. There was a smell too, a tangy, acidic smell, like someone had forgotten to flush the toilet in summer. I pinched my nose, but once the smell was inside, it didn't leave. At the landing, I followed it to a bedroom door. The latch had caught improperly, and the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Serena lay handcuffed to the bed, socks and duct tape gagging her mouth. Her skin was pale, eyes wide. When she saw me, her fingers twitched and her mouth bit at the restraints. Asterisk MMPH. Asterisk the floor beneath her and her dress were stained with bodily waste no one had bothered to clean. She thrashed harder against the restraints. H. Holy shit, are you okay? I stammered. Then the question hit me. If Serena had been missing for weeks, what was she doing here? Do you know where the keys are? I searched the room, but found no keys. The cuffs were locked to a wooden banister. I considered kicking the beam to break it, but before I could act, every light died. A door slammed below, and heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. I darted into the closet just as the intruder appeared. In the closet were supplies, duct tape, zip ties, bleach, and a packet of medical scalpels. He paused inside the darkened room, sniffing the air like an animal, narrow-shouldered and corded with muscle. There was something uncanny about him I couldn't place until he turned, and I could barely make out his face. Isaiah, her father. He ripped the tape from Serena's mouth. Where is he? He demanded. When she shook her head, he struck her across the temple. He brought outside filth to your sister. Her shape didn't hold. It tore. Only his blood can make amends. He reset the gag and pulled out his phone, the glow from the screen, the only light in the room. It lit up his face more clearly, and I now saw his eyes. They were rolled back in his head and twitching like something was pulling from inside. Hanging from his jaw was a bumpy sheet of dangling flesh, like a turkey blistered with red warts. My own phone buzzed in my pocket. Jasmine's face on the caller ID. Isaiah strained to listen. Thankfully, my phone had been on silent and only buzzed softly. Unsuccessful, he reached for a spray bottle on the bedside counter. Asterisk MMHB. MMHHB. Asterisk Serena struggled. Did he touch you? He misted the spray in the air. We'll need to start the process over if your skin is to be of any use to us. Serena attempted one final protest. Asterisk MMHHB. Asterisk Isaiah ignored her and sprayed the contents into her face. She screamed again, writhing in the cuffs like a dying bug. There was something in the air, a biting chlorine smell, bleach. When he spoke this time, his voice was not his own, but that of Jasmine's. One last time. Where's the boy who defiled the girl? Tears in her eyes, blinking against the sting of bleach, Serena lifted her head. My chest constricted. This was it. I never should have come here. I felt something was off from the moment I stepped inside the house. But instead, she grunted softly and nodded toward the bed's underside. Isaiah dropped to his hands and knees. As he peered underneath, she flicked her eyes at me and mouthed one word, run. Guilt roiled in my stomach, but I swallowed it and bolted for the closet. Isaiah jerked his head up too quickly and struck the bed frame. As he was recovering, Serena managed to kick his leg out from under him. In the precious few seconds that moment bought me, I dove down the stairs and into the night. My pulse hammered in my throat. My legs were numb, and I didn't realize how fast I'd been running until I stopped to catch my breath. When I did, I heaved the contents of my lunch onto the asphalt. I didn't see Isaiah anywhere on the street, so I took out my phone and called the police. When the blue and red lights flashed down the road, I felt safe enough to creep out of my hiding place and meet them as they stepped out of the car. Stay here, they ordered. I intended to do just that, but before I knew it, I was pacing up to the front window and peering inside. Their flashlights swept the floor. One hovered back to a pile of pink clothes folded on the living room floor. They hadn't been there before. The officer stepped closer, the light intensifying on the pink mass. Only then did I see it for what it was, flabby folds of skin, a flesh suit turned inside out. There was blood and juice and hair, but no bones. Nothing solid. It could have been worn like a coat. I wondered if they'd find Serena in the same state, like she'd been unzipped. It stirred my belly, and I backed away before I could analyze the scene anymore. They finished the sweep and met me outside. One of the officers, Ike, kept showing me a photo of Isaiah on his phone. Are you sure it was him? The preacher? Her father did this. All I could muster was, did you find anything in Jasmine's room? Officer Ike winced at that. The pillow has been submitted into evidence, and we won't know for sure until we get a DNA result from the blood, but he struggled with the next word. I'm not going to lie to you, kid. It's unlikely anything good happened to her. It could have been anyone's blood. I protested, but I didn't believe it myself. Jasmine's words echoed in my head. You have no idea what my home life is like. Ike smiled apologetically. The blood is several weeks old. When was the last time you heard from Jasmine? In person, I mean. 3 weeks ago, I said flatly. He patted my shoulder. Would you mind showing me the text messages? It can wait if you need time to recollect yourself. No, I said. Let's get it done now. I removed my phone from my pocket, and that's when I noticed a new message from Jasmine. Asterisk, don't wait up. I'll find you. Asterisk. Story 5. I awoke on a brisk, chilly morning. It's fall, so the leaves are as orange as the setting sun, which seems to leave us in the cold sooner than it does in the summer. Almost like it's running away from the breeze. Starting my day, I wandered clumsily down the stairs and smashed my toe against the end of the banister at the bottom of the stairs. Irritated, I angrily made my coffee. Folgers with a dash of instant espresso. So fancy. I got dressed in my usual work attire, donning my reflective vest, my ski mask, my boots, and my hard hat. The dirty, brown leather, still caked in mud and roadwork material from the past few weeks. The foreman wants to drag the project out as long as possible so we can extend the contract and make more profit. Lovely. If only that money made its way into our pockets instead of his. I set out on my commute with another exciting day of asphalt pouring to distract me from the empty house waiting for me at the end of it all. Whatever. At the work site, I noticed none of the equipment was running. I didn't hear the thunderous claps of the asphalt pounder slamming the road into place, compacting it. I wasn't graced with the screech of the cat's hydraulics, or the reverse beep of the dump trucks. There was a stillness in the air that unsettled me beyond anything else. The only other living soul was some jogger running past me on the opposite side of the highway. Something about seeing him in all this silence, it brought me a sense of familiarity. Yet, I still felt overwhelmed with anxiety. Almost guilty? I chalked it up to my existence being an insult to peace. A line I'll never forget after the man who took me in, who I once looked up to, said to me those very words. That was the day my admiration turned to hatred. My phone seemed to drift into my field of view as I instinctively grabbed it to call the foreman, excited for the possibility that I might go home early. 5 ringing tones with a deafening silence between them, and still no answer. Try again. On the first ring, my call's answered, but only for a split second. He hangs up immediately. I heard what sounded like static blasting through the speakers right before it cut off. Frustrated, I turned to the second in command. I was ready to end the day before it had even begun. He called Gary, my supervisor. He picks up in a panic before the first ring even finishes, and I have to calm him down to get the story out of him. Gary, what's going on? Where you guys at? Where's the fucking equipment? Do I just take the day off? Or? He stutters over his words. You can tell from the sound of his voice that he's actively looking at something extremely distressing. Jesus, man. Nobody told you what happened to the foreman? I don't have time to worry about you, or that fucking bullshit highway. Mark's dead. My eyes went wide after those last 2 words. I froze in place, stopping even my breathing to listen to every detail of what Gary's preparing to tell me. His entire goddamn head's all over the floor in the workshop's office. I got the ambulance on the way, but holy shit, man, this is fucking gnarly. He inhales sharply, giving himself a pause. I can barely breathe. I walked in and slipped on chunks of his skull and pieces of his brain. The blood slicking up the floor didn't help much either. I was pissed the fuck off, yelling and cursing, thinking someone spilled some shit overnight and didn't clean it up, leaving it for the morning crew, like always. His tone shifts to an even darker, disassociated, detached one. You can hear his brain grinding its gears to suppress the trauma he's actively developing. That's when I called out to the Alexa to turn the lights on for me, while I laid there on the floor, writhing in pain after hitting my back on the edge of a filing cabinet. I looked down my chest and across the room from me. Guess what the fuck I had to see? The first thing I had to see this morning when I clocked in. What dash? I attempt to mutter, as he impatiently cuts me off halfway through the word. He's almost rushing to get the words out, like purging a sickness with a gag reflex. his hurried tone barely coherent in his deep-breathed, stressful rambling as he tries to recount the situation. It's fucking Mark, sitting upright in his chair, his hands tucked into his hoodie pocket, and his hood's up. Of course, I fail to realize that there's not nearly enough space under his deflated-ass hood to actually contain his head. He pauses after a deep sigh. I can imagine him pinching the bridge of his nose and squinting while trying to make sense of what he's just seen. You can almost hear the air whoosh by his microphone as he throws his hands up in defeat or exasperation. I thought this shit was a joke and started fucking screaming at him about how I'm gonna quit and sue over the massive gash in my back that I got after slipping on what I thought was red dye. I thought I just got the bad end of one of his stupid-ass pranks. I wanted to beat his ass. He gulps down air. His dry throat and shaky voice can be heard as he trembles and struggles to regain his composure. He's getting to the worst parts. I tell him, take your time. Eventually, after some silence and the faint warble of ambulance sirens in the background, he finishes telling me. I walked over and slapped the shit out of the hood that I thought was pulled over his face. Turns out, there wasn't a face to hide. It wasn't attached to the rest of him. It was splattered all over my back, the walls, the ceiling, and the bottom of my boots. I can't fucking do this. I just got back from a goddamn war, man. I can't do this. He trails off, repeating himself over and over again until eventually I got so freaked out by his panic attack that I simply withdrew and hung up. I couldn't help him, the same way he couldn't help Mark. A handful of days after our call, I wake up on the couch. I had one of those lucid dreams. Fascinating. I could have a wife, a better home, and a job I actually enjoy. Didn't remember much of it, though. Such is the way of life. The police ruled my boss's death an accidental one. Cause? Unknown. There's no gun, no bullets, no gunshot residue from the barrel's flash. Nothing. The most inexplicable, unexplainable case they'd gotten on their desk in years. They couldn't even chalk it up to suicide. Just Mark and his disgusting, exploded head. The next day, it's 3 p.m., I can just tell. I've spent so many days laying here that I can simply tell the time based on the position of the window frame shadow on my floor. That, in the afternoon, news announced the time before they continued the seemingly endless coverage about the incident. More than a week goes by of being laid off work due to company budgeting conflicts, given a new mess they had to pay to clean up, as well as the survivorship benefits they were obligated to send to his family. They had to pay for Gary's therapist as well. In another timeless, confusing haze of days, I start to drink the stillness away. I thought about Mark and how he deserved it. Finally got what was coming to him. Guilt washed over me, but it came in waves, just like my animosity for a man that got his own retribution delivered seemingly by the divine. My rage was more consistent than my shame for feeling it. He was an awful man, and I couldn't think of someone who didn't want to take a chunk out of him. I just wasn't expecting full-blown death. No evidence on the cameras, though. Nobody snuck in or out, no fingerprints, no hair, spit, blood, nothing. We didn't have night vision, so we weren't able to see what happened after the lights went out, when he sat down at his cold, metal desk and put his hands in his pockets. It racked my mind. How? What happened to the man I hated? That question became my lullaby. Every night, as the world outside my window turned into a quiet void, I'd hear it whisper from somewhere inside me. Not just in thought, but inside me. Like it had made a home in my bones. Like the question itself had a voice. Sometimes I thought I was dreaming it. Sometimes I was certain I was awake when I heard it. Then came that other morning. Cold again. Still fall. Still empty. But that morning felt different. There was no coffee. No toast stub. No birds. Just silence. As if the air had agreed to hold its breath for something to pass. I sat up on the couch, blinking through the crust of sleep and hangover. I could feel my heart pounding and didn't know why, like I had sprinted through something in a dream I couldn't remember. The TV was on, though I hadn't touched the remote. The afternoon news again. 3 p.m., same time, same story. They were still covering Mark's death. Still no answers. Only now, something was off. I recognized the footage they were playing. A clip from our job site security feed, one I had watched a dozen times already. But this time there was something new. A shape, in the dark, In the brief frame between when Mark walked into the office and when the lights shut off, just before everything went black, I saw it, a figure standing in the doorway. Still, unmoving. It wasn't there before. I knew it wasn't. I had scrubbed that footage frame by frame the day I got laid off. But now it stood there, tall, half-silhouetted, and familiar in shape. Too familiar. In that moment, some disembodied voice in my head, which sounded nothing like the internal monologue I spent 23 years of my life with, uttered the possibility. What if those dreams are just memories? I reached for my phone and tried to rewind the live TV. It wouldn't let me. Then the screen went black. Not just the TV, the room. All the power died. Every outlet, every light. Silence. Then footsteps. Wet ones. Like boots stepping through puddles on concrete. But I was alone. I gripped the edge of the couch and waited. The footsteps got closer. And then they stopped. Right behind me. But I couldn't turn around. I tried. My body refused. Then a voice spoke, raspy and low, like someone trying to remember how to speak through sand. A smoker's voice like mine. You never asked who else hated him. I turned, finally. What I saw, it was me, but not me. Paler, like he'd lived in moonlight all his life. Same eyes, same jaw, same beard, same mustache, same mud-stained boots. But no hard hat, no vest, no color in his face. Just a smile, tired and cold. I thought. It was a dream, I muttered. He nodded. You chased me through one. And suddenly I remembered, running through streets that bent sideways, chasing a man I couldn't see clearly. Always behind him, always just one step away. And then, just before I woke up, I saw his face turn toward me in the mirror of a broken shop window. It had been mine, not my own reflection caught at an angle which I couldn't comprehend, but my face on the body of another whose existence was the most haunting concept I could have ever imagined. I needed a door, he said. A moment. Something to step through. You killed Mark. He looked at me for a long, long time. And then he said, we did. I opened my mouth to speak, but he was already fading, like the shadow of breath on glass, vanishing without a sound. The power returned with a sudden hum. The TV turned back on. The footage now showed nothing. No shadow, no figure, just Mark walking in and the lights going out. I stared at the screen until the news anchor returned, smiling as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I still don't know who or what he was. A version of me from somewhere else? A dream that slipped loose from its leash? All I know is this. Every time I fall asleep now, I find myself running again. But this time, he's not ahead of me. I am, and I can feel him getting closer. Every night. Closer. That's it for today's creepy Reddit tales. Before we go, I just want to say a quick thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and sticking around. You guys keep this channel going, and I'll be back soon with more stories that'll make your skin crawl. Drop a comment if you've got your own spooky tale to share, and I'll see you in the next one.